Today we are joined by Michelle Nelson. Michelle is a partner in the Reed Smith Energy and Natural Resource Practice. She's a specialist arbitration lawyer with over 22 years of experience. Her practice focuses on the Middle East, advising on the major oil and gas and construction infrastructure disputes. She also does a lot of her own advocacy practice, taking cases from cradle to grave as part of the disputes. She graduated from the University of Bristol with a bachelor's in law. Michelle was awarded the 2018 Legal 500 Hall of Fame for construction in the UAE. She's routinely rated as a leading individual for construction in Chambers Legal 500 and Who is Who Legal. She won one of the largest value arbitration awards in the Middle East on behalf of an international client and has become a role model for many in her industry. Why? We will find out in our interview. Michelle, thank you very much for joining me and for your support of our reflection series.
You're very welcome. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. And I'm really looking forward to cover your very interesting career journey. So if we take a step back and start from the beginning, you started your career as a lawyer in the construction space, and we can say that it is male-dominated industry. Tell us about your background and how you decided to work in this specific industry.
Thank you very much. It's fair to say I never actually planned to be a construction lawyer. I had experience of different areas of practice as a trainee lawyer, and construction disputes was the area that I enjoyed the most. But at the time that I started in the area of construction law, I came across relatively few women, either at senior levels in the client organisations or witnesses and experts that we dealt with on particular cases. But this didn't actually seem as an issue for me as far as I could see at that time. And I embraced my chosen career in the construction law area. And I have to say, it wasn't an issue. I was always treated with respect by the male clients or the counterparts that I dealt with. So I certainly didn't have any concerns at the time that I made my choices. But I think it's fair to say that the construction industry generally, obviously, isn't. It does have some issues in relation to the number of women in senior positions, either at the C-suite level or even on site as engineers or quantity surveyors and the like in practice. So there is that disparity there. But I do believe that actually, as an industry, what they have managed to do is to retain talent in senior levels, and I think that's something to be commended. But I think the fundamental issue, and one that's being recognised at grassroots level, is encouraging more women to take on STEM subjects at university. Mm-hmm. So to encourage through use of sort of further science, technology, maths and engineering. So I think there's work to be done, but certainly it was always an area that appealed to me very much, and one that I wanted to work in going forwards.
Amazing. That's really, really nice to open our interview. Did you have any role models that you could look up to that could, help you to grow your career? And as you were rightly saying, there is a long way to go, but I think we already did a good job.
I mean, it's a good question. I remember as being a very junior lawyer that I struggled to find suitable role models, to be absolutely honest. And I think that was sort of twofold. One was that there weren't that many senior lawyers around in the business to actually look to see if they were a suitable role model. But I think also at the time that I was growing up as a junior lawyer, there was incredible amount of pressure on women lawyers, but also any women in senior places in business, that unless you were aggressive and unless you kind of kept your personal life hidden, then there was this expectation that you could not necessarily succeed unless you came across in this particular way. And I remember thinking to myself that was not the sort of person or lawyer that I wanted to be in my practice. And therefore, as a consequence of that, I sort of started out on a path to actually sort of decide, well, actually, I'd rather be a role model for others and look to see what kind of role model I would like to be. So I sort of decided to do my own thing, I guess.
No, that's absolutely very nice comment. And I think in our interview we will get to your experience and how you actually mentor or share your own experience with others. Before doing that, you made your way to the UAE in 2005. How did you end up in Dubai? What sort of environment did you face when you entered the market as a female lawyer? Did you experience any prejudice?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yes. So the firm that we were working in London at the time approached myself and my husband around the end of 2004, early 2005, and asked if we would be interested in relocating over to Dubai to develop the firm's Middle East business at the time. And it was said to us that this would be a 2 to 3 year stint. And here, 16 years on, we're still here. So it's obviously been a very good experience. I mean, in fact, at that time, I had little by way of preconceptions. Although I remember other people asking me if I was concerned as to how I would be treated, or if I was expecting it to be difficult for me to work in the Middle East. And I honestly did not feel that was the case. I'd already had some experience of working with Middle Eastern clients in my practice from London, and did not have any concerns that I would find it difficult or be treated any differently. And in fact, when I arrived, it was absolutely the case. From day one, whether it was clients, whether they were local clients or international clients, whether it was local lawyers or other lawyers, other opponents or judges or arbitrators, I didn't have a single instance where I felt that there was any different treatment because I was a female lawyer in the environment. The only issue I remember from the early days is having an incident where I went to a construction client's office and found that they didn't have any female washrooms for their senior executives. So that caused a little bit of a stir where they were trying to accommodate me. But that was, that was something that was difficult for them because they'd obviously never had that situation before. But I'm sure perhaps they did since. So no, it's always been a very positive experience for me working here in the Middle East.
That's very good to hear because honestly, I can relate to, and I think this is also what we are hearing from our other guests, that very similar experience as you are describing, basically zero prejudice, absolutely equal opportunities, respect, which is standard in the workplace. And in addition to that, actually, it would be other colleagues back in Europe or US that would actually have those questions. So yes, very, very similar stories actually we hear. Thank you very much for sharing. We also, when we discussed previously, you talk about glass ceilings and breaking barriers. How does your experience in the Middle East compare to your experience in the West?
No, and I think this is a really interesting subject, and I think I'd like to sort of talk about two aspects to that. One is I think the opportunity for women to actually pursue their career expectations and development here in the region, and I think one of the differences which makes that more easier, I think, is the fact that here, certainly from my own experience, I've been able to develop and create a home support network, which has allowed me to have, I had a helper with me that was with me from just before my first daughter was born for 10 years. And to have somebody that you can trust and help you at home to allow you the freedom to pursue your career obviously makes a big difference. And things like, for example, my colleagues in London, they have long commutes to the office. They spend, long periods of time away from their home environment. So it makes that tension quite difficult in terms of how you manage your career and your work-life balance. So I think that's relevant. In addition to that, though, one thing that I would say is I think the very nature of the environment that we're in here in Dubai, the encouragement of entrepreneurship, the lack of the rigid bureaucracy that sometimes might sort of be found in bigger, perhaps more established environments in the corporate world, I think actually helps women to develop and go to the top of what they want to do. Because I think if you're good and you have the talent and you have the ability, then there is the opportunities to succeed. So I think that sort of more perhaps newer sort of environment to work in can sometimes be a positive as opposed to a negative.
Mm-hmm. No, thank you very much for sharing this insight, because I can very much relate to this point of view as well. And at the end, the career is in our own hands, and the market is here, great opportunities. So why not to why just not to pursue it? You touch on your family, and that's exactly next topic that I would like to discuss with you. As you progressed your career and you started your family, as you mentioned, you mentioned also that you were not only working but also having your daughters, right? Um, so how was it? Necessary to find your own way of balancing a busy practice with your family life, and how did you make it all work? I know you touch upon that a little bit with the support you had, but I'm sure that without supporting husband, you wouldn't be able to make it as well.
No, absolutely. I think, I've been very lucky in that regard. I have a very supportive husband who's also a busy lawyer himself, and two daughters who are now moving to up their own education ladder. But I think to me, what's really important is two things. One, to have, as I've just mentioned in the last sort of discussion, to have that sort of support network around you at home to help that run more smoothly. But I think in terms of from the business perspective, I think what's really important is to have a supportive team around you in terms of the both the lawyers that you work with, but also the support team that work with you. And I think it's very much a two-way street. Obviously they support me, but likewise I support them. And in terms of operating as a unit, but having the support of them through their careers, but also so that that there are that it's a team effort. And one of the things that I have felt very strongly about from early on, and particularly when I said I wanted to be a good role model myself, is to mentor junior lawyers and to bring them through the ranks through their through their careers. And I think as part of that, what's really, really important is to lead by example. And so I want to see that there is a lot of losses of female lawyers, across the whole spectrum of law firms, because they don't believe that they can actually get to a senior level and have both. And so therefore, I very firmly believe it's less about what you say, it's more about what you do. And therefore, I want to see, I want junior lawyers to see me as somebody who's both dedicated to my family, but also dedicated to my career and my clients. and that it's possible to do both, with the right degree of support.
Mhm.
Is it
Mhm.
always easy? No. Are there lots of balls that go up in the air and come down to drop from time to time? Well, of course, but you have to do your best to try and get the two to work together, and to recognize that there will be things that you have to prioritize,
Mhm.
and things will things will come and go in terms of the level of commitment. But lists is my number one top tip to anyone. I am the queen of lists, and I think that's something that helps me try and stay on top of it all. But I think one of the big things that I find is working out what are the important things. And, that for me is, well, can we do everything? No. Can we do everything 100%? Absolutely not. But working out what's important. And so, for example, if there is a bake sale at school, well, I'll buy shop bought cakes because I do not have the time to be baking on top of everything else. But does it really matter? Well, no, I don't think it does. So I think if we prioritize and work out what's important, then we help to try and maintain a little bit of balance.
No, thank you very much for sharing it. And I will pick one sentence that you actually mentioned. You became role model for your junior colleagues, which I think is absolutely amazing. What advice would you have for them?
Yeah, I mean, look, my advice to them is to work out what works for you. Because I think one of the things that I feel very strongly about is that there is not one size fits all as to how to do this. Some people prefer to stay in the office all of the time and try and keep their two sort of two ways of life separate, and others try to mix it up. But I think for me, it's all about sort of being being available. For me, it's about being available. I personally, have always sort of taken the approach that I'd like to go home at a reasonable time and spend some time with my children before they go to bed, but then I'll pick up and carry on working in the evening afterwards. So flexibility and availability is key, but communication is really, really important. And I think as long as, so in terms of what I'm very keen to tell my team is that if there is a sports day event or something that you need to go to, then absolutely you really must. But communicate, because then everybody knows where everybody is, people's expectations are managed, etc. And I think that that a lot of problems perhaps have come in the past where people have been shy about saying, well, actually, I'm not available. I'd like to go and do this, and but I am available at 5 o'clock in the morning or 9 o'clock at night, etc. So I really do think honesty and communication is important, and mutual respect. And I think if then everybody respects everybody's own situations, then it means that the team works better together.
Thank you very much. Very wise words. Really appreciate the input on this important topic, and I'm sure our audience as well. When we look at our current situation, COVID has brought the workplace into all of our homes, and this has created challenges for many, but for some, there has been positive change with the new normal work-life balance. So, what are your thoughts on this more flexible approach organizations are taking? And as we go back to normal, will people be able to maintain this degree of flexibility?
Yes, thank you. It's a really good question, and I do think actually it's one of the few positives of the COVID pandemic is the fact that everybody was forced to work from home, work remotely, and work in a different environment. But actually, what it showed is that was possible, and through changing certain techniques, having more sort of virtual meetings, etc., that flexibility can work and that people can do their jobs in that way. And I think what that has done is help to create perhaps more of a work-life balance. You don't need to commute, you don't need to get ready in the morning, and it's given that location flexibility for employers and employees. And I think, therefore, it's also accommodated different constraints as well. There's been many people that have had to juggle their own work with sort of homeschooling their children and sort of have more flexibility in approach and hours. And I think because the pandemic has shown that this can be done, then I believe, certainly from my own business, but I think more broadly, that that will naturally mean that people will have more of a balance going forwards. And it might be that people are actively spending part of their week in the office and part of their week outside the office, and that they've got that flexibility to do both. So I certainly do see that as a positive.
Very good, very good. I think this is great input and great insight. And I think only next weeks and years will actually show how we will be able to capture this pandemic and actually learn from that in terms of the work-life balance. Before closing our interviews, and thank you so much again for joining us, I have to ask you, what advice do you have for next generations?
Thank you, and that's obviously a really good question, and I certainly wouldn't profess to have all the answers for myself, let alone for others. But I do believe that it's doing my best to be a positive influence on those around me, including my own two daughters. And my advice to them is the same. Work hard to the best of your abilities. Be confident in what you do, and perhaps above all, be kind to yourself, and also, of course, to others as well. But I think building a network around you of like-minded people who understand the challenges that you might face and support your endeavors, and be there for the ups and the downs above it all, is something that is really important. And above all, perhaps try and take time to yourself and find the balance that works for you.
Wonderful. Very wise words. Thank you, Michelle, very much for joining us. It was really a pleasure to discuss your experience, your point of view, and I'm looking forward to speaking next time.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much for having me.